Sudan's army says it's regained control of a highway connecting the capital to North Kordofan state. The area has become the latest front in the conflict with paramilitaries. Will it be enough to shift the outcome of the fighting, which shows no sign of letting up? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. 3 years of fighting between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces have devastated Sudan. The conflict has caused the world's largest humanitarian crisis, displacing more than 13 million people and killing tens of thousands of civilians. Both sides have been accused of war crimes and other abuses. Recent fighting has centred around the city of el-Obeid, under siege by paramilitaries. The army has retaken a main highway linking it to the capital, which could weaken the RSF, but hundreds of thousands of people trapped there are still at risk. So what will it take to stop the conflict? We'll discuss that with our panel of guests in just a moment, but first this report from Nargis Mobilegi.
After more than 3 years, Sudan's army says it has taken control of a critical highway in North Kordofan from the paramilitary rapid support forces. The 350-kilometre road links the capital Khartoum to el-Obeid, a city that has been under siege by the RSF. Controlling the supply route is a major win for the army. It will help them move troops, weapons and supplies and potentially push back against the advance of the paramilitary. For months, both sides have sought to seize supply lines around el-Obeid. The army has taken the highway from Khartoum to el-Obeid. The north-south route continues to the southern border, while an east-west route connects RSF strongholds in the Darfur region to army-controlled central and eastern Sudan. El-Obeid has become the new front in the fighting between the Sudanese army and the RSF. Both sides have been accused of human rights abuses. At least 500,000 people there are trapped with limited food supplies. The UN has warned of a humanitarian catastrophe in the city, and last week said women were being raped just trying to get water.
The emerging pattern of violence against women and girls in el-Obeid in Sudan, where drone attacks during the day and sexual violence at night have left no safe window for women and girls to collect water. UN Women's data shows that the number of women and girls requiring gender-based violence services in Sudan has quadrupled since the conflict began, now reaching an estimated 12.7 million women and girls this year alone.
The UN has warned that as fighting intensifies, el-Obeid could become another Fasher. The RSF took the city in North Darfur last year following an 18-month siege, resulting in mass killing and famine. The paramilitary group is accused of targeting critical services, like this healthcare centre.
Due to an attack by the Rapid Support Forces, the centre was completely destroyed, resulting in damage to property, equipment and the building as a whole, including the pharmacy, the ward, the ultrasound and ECG departments, supervisors' offices and operating rooms.
The conflict is affecting much of the country. More than 70% of Sudan's hospitals have been destroyed. More than half of the population don't have enough to eat. And over 14 million people have been displaced in what the UN has called the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Nargis Mobilegi, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
3 years and 3 months of devastating war. This is our chance to catch up with where things stand on the ground now in Sudan with our guests today on Inside Story. From the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, we're joined by Sanosi Zakaria, a former Sudanese army officer and currently editor-in-chief of the Sudan Mirror. And from New Delhi, Shashwat Saraf, Sudan country director for the Norwegian Refugee Council. And in Cardiff in Wales in the UK, El-Basha Idris, a Sudan analyst. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Let me start in Sudan with you, Sanosi. The Sudanese army's made its first significant advance in some months. Let me ask you this question. How significant?
Yes, of course. The reopening of the highway road between Omdurman and el-Obeid is very important, and it is actually a fundamental achievement in the war. The highway is very significant for, I think, for three dimensions. The first dimension or perspectives is the military one. Because, you know, if you have an easy access for logistics, whether you are conducting attack operations or you are conducting defensive operations, things will be easy for you. You will be able to reinforce your forces, to evacuate casualties, and to make any operational things you want to do. The second thing is economical. You know, the road is called, from its name, you know its importance. It's called export highway, export national highway. So Kordofan and Darfur are productive areas, agricultural and many other productives. And Khartoum and Port Sudan are consumers. And Port Sudan is the way where you can export these products. So the way from economical point of view is very important. Also, it is from humanitarian point of view is important because you can, the government, the NGOs, whether they are international or they are domestic, they can send supplies and they can send humanitarian aids for the people affected there, whether in Kordofan and in Darfur.
Let me bring in Al-Bashir Idris. So Sudan, a very large country, but this seems to me, and you just heard Sanosi there mention it, seems to be a key crossroads of key trading routes across the country.
Well, I'm agreeing with Sanosi. Essentially, having that access to the crossroads and to the highway to be able to get into Kordofan, into other states as well, is very essential, not only for the Sudanese army, but for the Sudanese people as well. As we have talked about for the past few weeks, and as the people may have known about the incoming siege on el-Obeid, this liberation essentially of the areas from the RSF-controlled hands back to the SAF is actually a positive development. The reason why is because over the past few, since the beginning of this war, really, whenever we've seen area taken back by the army, the amount of supplies and humanitarian support we've seen quickly going in speaks volumes. And I believe we should take this in the spirit that it's intended, especially when we see celebration videos and the people rejoicing because they understand and know that they will finally get those supplies in, may that be INGOs or even to the domestic partners in Sudan. However, what we do also realize is the reactions of the leaders, that being of Hemeti of the RSF and Burhan of the army. We've seen yesterday Burhan ended up a day after the liberation, straight within the new territories, signaling to civilians that it is safe for them to come back. And it shows a different story. However, when we look at the reaction of the RSF and Hemeti, and him essentially, by the sounds of it, calling for the devolution of powers, this means that we're going to see more crazed kind of responses from the RSF, which will hinder and impact the humanitarian response. Regardless of this side or that side, I think anybody can agree that NGOs and organizations are willing to assist and help those who can quickly get to the people and relieve them of their problems. And in this kind of case, I'm really hoping to see more work done by the humanitarian agencies in conjunction with the state authorities to make that happen.
Well, one of those humanitarian agencies is the Norwegian Refugee Council. Shashwat, you represent that group. You are the Sudan country director. Will it be possible to get more aid in? How welcome is this? Because el-Obeid, there have been warnings coming from the international community, really grave and stark warnings coming for some months now about a siege in el-Obeid, an estimated 500,000 civilians, and on top of that, maybe as many as another 100,000 displaced people there. Will you be able to get aid to these people and areas beyond el-Obeid, or is there still a problem? And I think one of the problems, we may discuss it further, is the fact that there are drones operating everywhere now, which means perhaps you don't need to encircle a place in order to besiege a place.
Right. I think what we need to recognize is foremost the importance of protection of civilians who are in el-Obeid and surrounding areas. As you mentioned, we have 500,000 people plus over 100,000 internally displaced people who are there. The importance of road is for two primary reasons, according to me. One is a safe passage. For people who think that they need to move out for safety, have safe passage and can leave and find safety wherever they feel they are safe, their families are safe. The second is for humanitarian access. Humanitarian supplies, humanitarian personnel can move in and provide support to the populations that are in particular geographical locations where food insecurity is severe, water support is almost non-existent, education centers are closed, and all kinds of basic services are very difficult for populations or people to find. So we will have to wait and see if there is safe passage for people and people are moving out. The only road that was available for people in el-Obeid was from el-Obeid to White Nile State to Kosti, and then onwards to Khartoum or Omdurman. We've also seen in the recent past, attacks on this road to White Nile State and on humanitarian convoys that were moving between Kosti and el-Obeid, which did disrupt the flow of humanitarian supplies into el-Obeid. So what we do fear is continued drone attacks and continued targeting of humanitarian supplies and personnel.
Sanosi, as I said, we have had these warnings from the international community, the UN Security Council, the UN Human Rights Council. We had the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights warning that there was a risk of fresh, serious international crimes and an impending human rights disaster. One of the reasons I assume they're warning, as they were warning, is because of the spectre of what happened last year in Darfur in Fasher on the 27th of October and the days immediately afterwards. Just remind us of that quite appalling event.
Right. What happened in Fasher last year, I don't think it will happen again in el-Obeid or in any other in any other town or city here in Sudan, because el-Obeid is not Fasher. People were talking about the near collapse of el-Obeid, and it was just a propaganda, I think, from the RSF and the forces which support them, whether they are international or internal forces.
Fasher, just remind us what happened in Fasher in Darfur.
Well, and unfortunately, it was around one of the other few moments of genocide that have already happened in the 21st century, once again committed by the RSF, who were just the gingerweed no less than 20 years ago. And rightfully so. I don't think anybody on this panel wants to see a repeat of that, nor does anybody of the world. We were seeing pools of blood seen from space. However, given the conditionalities at that moment and the location of Fasher and what it meant, 18-month siege, and these people were eating essentially mud and seeds and finding whatever they can. They even poisoned animal feed because they were so cut off, and they were getting, even then if they could, supplies coming in by airlift. by airdrop. However, in this case of el-Obeid, due to its locality much closer to the center, away from those RSF strongholds or traditional RSF strongholds, there's also that mitigation that essentially it's not all over yet. And we've certainly seen that. And in the zones that the SAF have secured and where Burhan has already appeared, the conditions for recovery are essentially being created. Health facilities are coming back online at a scale of around 75%, according to the Ministry of Health, and the supply routes opening and civilians beginning to believe that the worst of the siege is pressure is at least lifting. And so between that of what we're seeing now in just the past 72 hours of el-Obeid compared to what we've seen on al-Fasher, there is a bit more hope and ambition in terms of not to have the repeat of what's happened just 10 months ago.
Okay,
however, that doesn't
let me bring in
relax.
Sashwat, who is our humanitarian on the panel from the Norwegian Refugee Council. Do you share that hope? Because some of the reports from el-Obeid in recent weeks sounded really dire and really grim. Reports of hunger, reports of disease. And one of the more striking things I read recently was a briefing from the regional director of UN Women, who said that drones were attacking water sources during the daylight hours. So women and girls were going at night to collect water, and they were being harassed, raped, and subjected to other forms of sexual violence. So darkness was offering no protection whatsoever.
You're right. The humanitarian crisis that we've seen unfold in el-Obeid has been very, very worrying. We've seen deliberate attacks on civilian infrastructure. We've seen attacks on health centers. We've seen attacks on water supply centers, to power grids, and to fuel depots. I remember a teacher telling us that a liter of fuel at one point of time was equivalent to the monthly wage of a teacher. And we were seeing hundreds of thousands of people actually in severe food insecurity. We were talking about levels which were IPC level 4 of food insecurity inside el-Obeid and in surrounding areas. Water has been one of the biggest gaps and needs for population. And that has also been one of the reasons why a lot of people have started to move out of el-Obeid, either to White Nile State in Kosti or even further onwards to Khartoum state.
And Shashwat, can I just bring in another element to this? Because there's also been cholera outbreaks, maybe not so much in el-Obeid, but heading in that direction. How worried are you about disease too?
We are very worried because we're seeing very high number of cholera cases already in West Kordofan. And we know that with the rainy season, we will see cholera cases in el-Obeid and in the wider Kordofans. With the attack on the health centers, it actually further cripples our capacity to be able to respond to the cholera crisis that we can see unfold in various parts of Sudan as we talk today.
Okay, let's zoom out with you, Sanosi. We're talking about this part of the country. I'd like to get the big picture from you of what is the state of the battlefield. The war started on the 15th of April 2023. Who controls what in Sudan, and what's the direction of travel? Is it clear who is winning? That was a very simplistic question.
Actually, the follower of the war here in Sudan from 2023, you will see that the chairman of Sovereign Council and the commander-in-chief of the army, he was siege in the general headquarters, and in about 80% of Khartoum state was occupied by RSF, and even the ISF went to Jazeera, to Madani, to Sinnar. Right now, the things are changing. You have seen how the Sudanese army managed to push RSF from all these areas, and now fighting in Kordofan, from push the RSF from Jazeera, from Madani, from Sinnar, from near Al-Damazin, from near Al-Ghadarif, and from also the White Nile, some areas from White Nile. Now, Sudan Army or SAF is controlling, and it has the initiative. And the evidence of this is, you can see maybe for the first time, SAF is conducting simultaneous operation, if you can see. 4 cities or 4 areas has been retaken simultaneously. So this is a major progression in the operation by Sudanese people. It shows well planning. If you remember, the spokesperson of SAF, when he was besieged in the headquarters, he was talking to Al Jazeera, I think to Al Jazeera Mubashir, to your colleague Ahmed Taha. He told him that Sudanese army is a professional army. Now he is observing the shock, and you will see in the future how he will turn the table for the RSF. And now, what the previous spokesperson of the Sudanese army, what he said before 2 years or 3 years, it is happening now. Now Sudanese army or SAF is fighting in Darfur, and it have the initiative over RSF.
Fasher, the war has gone on, as we've said, for over 3 years now. But while this war has been taking place, the way of war, not just in Sudan, has been transformed by one bit of technology, the drones. How has it changed things in Sudan? Because neither side, certainly the RSF didn't have much of an air force, and the Sudanese army did not have a very sophisticated air force. Now, effectively, they both have air power, don't they?
Well, essentially, this war has catapulted the Sudanese belligerents to 21st century warfare with the drone attacks and strikes from both sides and the way they acquire them. We are entering the Sudanese autumn rainy season, so a lot of the mud, a lot of the ground will turn into mud, and a lot of the vehicles that the militia relies on will be non-operational, and as such, they will be using things like these drones to continue their attacks. However, whether the RSF has been proven to themselves to be of a disciplined force, that is certainly not the case. Even if they may have this more firepower, what we're seeing is that the RSF is becoming more atomized. Essentially, they're becoming more fragmented. And even if they were to essentially have more drones, the fact of the matter and what's happened in the past 24 hours, especially with the message that Hemeti has given out, essentially giving field commanders essentially full autonomy to do what they want to do, this will make it much more harder for a ceasefire to happen or to negotiate that, because there isn't a single reliable interlocutor. Essentially, the RSF may have all these weapons and such, but they're much more disorganized than they have been ever before. And having such a force running around with such firearms is very dangerous.
Okay,
and
let me bring in,
of that.
If you can let me bring in Sashwat again. Talk there from al-Bashir of the rainy season. In the recent UN Security Council meeting, Rosemary DiCarlo, the political chief of the UN, said normally the rainy season would bring a reduction in the fighting, but that's probably not going to happen this time around because of those drones. How worried are you as a humanitarian organisation about those drones, and how difficult does it make your work on the ground?
We are very worried. We are very worried about the way the drones have been used over the last few years. Both targeted attacks, but also indiscriminate attacks on civilian infrastructure, marketplaces, thousands of civilians who have been killed because of drone attacks. I can give you an example of a school, a learning center that we run in el-Obeid. Children frightened with the noise of drone hovering over el-Obeid, them actually not being able to study, learn, and concentrate because of the fear and the attacks that they have seen happen in el-Obeid. In just a week's time, there were 22 drone attacks, which killed more than 45 people in the month of June. And since then, we've seen multiple more drone attacks. And this is not only in el-Obeid. We're seeing drone attacks all across Sudan.
Okay.
I
want to turn at the very end.
Sorry,
I'd like to turn at the very end to Sanosi again, because I do think we need to quickly address the prospects of diplomacy. The US, the envoy there is Masad Boulos. He is a member of the Trump family, but he's also, because his son is married to Donald Trump's daughter, he is proposing a 90-day humanitarian truce. Do you see any hope in diplomacy at this stage? Briefly, please.
From my point of view, I don't see any chance for diplomacy right now. Now things are in the field. And in the war, the person who controls the field controls the diplomacy. And if you notice, from the beginning of the war, once the army push out and try to occupy and recapture the places where were captured by the RSF, we hear about the truce, we hear about 19 days, we hear about these things. So, first of all, they should talk to the RSF, and they know how to do it. Talk to the RSF to stop drones. Now, before a while, you were talking about the drones with our colleague. Drones in the war are used for reconnaissance, used for attacking military targets, and these military issues. But you see, now the RSF are using drones for what? As you see, for targeting schools, civilian infrastructure, power, and these things. So right now, I don't think there is any chance or opportunity for diplomacy. Maybe in the coming future we can see. But right now, I think that as the chairman of the Sovereignty Council says that they will push RSF from any territory here in Sudan.
Sanosi Zakaria, thank you very much. Sanosi Zakaria, Shashwat, Saraf and El-Basha. Idris, thank you, all three of you, for helping us with this complex subject. If you'd like to dig even deeper, you can find explainers and further analysis at our website, aljazeera.com. We'd also like to hear your thoughts and comments on the programme. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or on X, go to @AJ Inside Story. That's it from me, James Bays, and the team. I'll be back in this chair very soon, and Al Jazeera will be back with the very latest from around the world in just a moment. Stay tuned.